Okay, so let me start by saying I do regret that I cannot be there in person. I wish I will come next year. And we have very little time, so I will speak about some settings that are better suited for revision process instead of translation, which is the default for many MemoQ settings in the software. Okay, so let's, since this talk is about revision, I will only talk about bilingual files. And let's start with something very basic. I have a bilingual file in a format that MemoQ can import, but doesn't understand the confirmation settings. So the file was imported as not started. What will happen if I start to confirm translations here as a reviewer? So let's confirm a segment. It's okay, translation. This translation is okay. This translation is correct too. Now I'm in segment 6, and suddenly you may have noticed that, but I have a fuzzy match here inserted, 70%, which is actually a match from a previous segment, segment number 5, and not what the original content translated here was. Why? Because by default, when there is no, when you work with segments with not started status, MemoQ will try to insert matches there, the best matches it can find. And in this case, I have an empty translation memory. In this case, the best match is the 70% match from a previous segment. Of course, I can undo that by pressing Ctrl-Z and Ctrl-Z. And now you can see that the original translation is inserted, restored here. But doing that would be a very tedious process. So instead of relying on default MemoQ settings, we can make our life easier in the case where we have a file with not started statuses. We can go to Translation ribbon, Translation settings, Automatic lookup and insertion. And here, as you can see, by default, MemoQ will try to, after you go to a new segment, after confirming the previous one, MemoQ will try to, will always analyze the segment and try to insert the best hit it can find. And by default, it's 60%. And since we are reviewing the document and we don't want any fuzzy matches inserted, we want to set this value to 100%. So MemoQ can still overwrite existing content, but only if it's 100% match. So we can assume that that 100% match is something we've already confirmed. And if we do that, when I go back to a previous segment and confirm it, MemoQ shows me that 70% match. I'm sorry for my voice. But now it's not inserted automatically. It does not overwrite the content anymore. So very simple setting, but can be very, very useful. Okay, but this is a rare case. Theoretically, when you will work with a file with status, when you will be reviewing a files with a status not started. Let's try something MemoQ understands. So let's say you want to review a document translated in MemoQ or translated in Trados Studio. These statuses are understood by MemoQ, and you may get file which will look like this. So First of all, you have mostly confirmed segments. Now, I was confirming the segments in the previous file with the default role of a translator. Here, I am to review file which was confirmed by translated and confirmed by a translator. So what I need to do, I need to change my role. I'm talking about offline translations, not online projects. So as a reviewer, I need to change my status from translator to reviewer 1 or reviewer 2. If you are working with MemoQ files, you can set your status to reviewer 1. However, if you are reviewing Trados Studio files, you need to set your status to reviewer 2, because otherwise those segments won't have correct status after export and opening them in Trados Studio. So for Trados Studio, you always, when you reviewing studio files in MemoQ, you always need to set your status as a reviewer 2. For MemoQ, you can use reviewer 1 depending on your actual role in a project. So let's say reviewer 1. And now I can confirm a segment. And what will happen? I will go to the next unconfirmed one. But hey, I want to see the segment that was set just after my confirmed segment. I want to see the next segment that was confirmed by a translator. Why did MemoQ jump to the segment number 5, which has status edited? Because MemoQ uses the go to next settings. And currently my go to next settings are set for translator. Let's go to edit ribbon. See, go to next and select settings. This is one of the dialogues which I actually use quite a lot. So by default, when you install MemoQ, MemoQ will use go to next settings, all rows, no filtering. It means that when you confirm a segment with Control Enter, MemoQ will go to the next segment regardless of its status, which may be useful in some scenarios, but it's very inconvenient if you work as a translator with bilingual files, in cases where you already have some segments translated and you are not supposed to touch them, or some segments are locked and obviously you are not supposed to touch them. Then you going to next segment after confirming the current is very tedious, because then you need to manually jump to next segment you need to actually translate. So for translation, not confirmed in any role is a very good setting. However, when you are reviewing, so let's just stick to not confirmed in any role. Let's confirm this segment and segment number 11, which is not edited, not started status. However, once you run out of not confirmed segments, when you, as a reviewer, try to go to next segment that is confirmed by a translator, every time you press Control Enter, you will get no more matching segments to jump in this document dialog, which is pretty annoying. So what you can do here as a reviewer, as opposed to translator, you select Go to Next, Settings, and change to Status tab, and then select Translator Confirmed. As you can see, default not confirmed in any role actually resolves into several statuses, not started, edited, assembled from fragment, and so on. But you can also add translator confirmed. And that means that whenever you press Ctrl Enter as a reviewer, MemoQ will go to the next segment that was either unconfirmed or confirmed by a translator, but not by a reviewer. So auto-propagated segments will be skipped, will be jumped over. Let's confirm this segment. And again, there is an issue here because MemoQ brought me to the next unconfirmed segment, which is, as it happens, locked. So we can refine our settings. Go to next again, settings, status, and tell MemoQ we are only interested in unlocked rows. Just click OK. And now MemoQ will jump to the next unconfirmed by a reviewer, but it will skip all the segments that were confirmed by reviewer. So lives get easier as a reviewer. By the way, one more setting that might interest you as a reviewer here is view pane. View pane in MemoQ by default shows you a preview of a document if it's available. So let's say you work with a Word file, Excel, or PowerPoint, you will get a file preview. But you can also switch to active comments or review. To do that, you simply need to move your mouse pointer into the view pane. And if you switch to review and click any segment, MemoQ will show you some useful information about that segment. Most notably, it will show you where that particular match came from. So as you can see here, this 100% match comes from MemoQ webinar translation memory, and the user who confirmed was Marek, that's me. If there are any quality assurance warnings, they will be shown here too. And if the match you can see in the file comes from a machine translation plugin, you will get that information here too. So this is one place where you will see that confirmed segment was originally came from machine translation. Of course, provided that the translator used empty plugin within MemoQ. Okay, so those are go to next settings that can be very useful. And you can also experiment with the go to next on stuff like if you only need to verify a review after certain user, you can go to conflict and changes, get usernames, and say, I want to only check after Jarek and not after Marek. Then I can select username of this, and MemoQ, when I press Ctrl Enter, MemoQ will jump to a segment that was confirmed by Jarek and not by Marek. It's the same as filtering here. You can filter by segments confirmed by particular user. Okay, so several settings related to quick jumping between confirmation and making sure that your changes segments that you confirm will not be fuzzy. You will not overwrite translations with the fuzzy matches. Okay, now let's see something a bit more complex. Repetitions. You know that repetitions are generally our friend, because if you have a file with repetitions, you can use auto-propagation to populate those repeated segments. However, let's take a look at those 4 files. Let me do a quick statistics. Let's calculate. And as you can see, I hope you can see on the analysis result, those 4 files include 16,000 words in total, but half of those, over 8,000 words, are repetitions. So there is a lot of repeated segments between those files. You need to make sure that when you review, your changes will be inserted exactly the same way in all the files. So what will happen if I open a single file and insert some changes, some reviewer changes here? Let me just edit 2 segments. The nonsensical changes, but something I can quickly show you. What will happen if I now close that document and go to the second one? Well, of course, my changes were not propagated, because auto-propagation works only within a document. You can see that I have a match now for this segment, but it was not inserted, and it's not propagated. So what can I do? As a reviewer, but also as a translator, I usually simply create a view of all the files in a project. So I'm selecting those 4. It doesn't make sense to include other 2 in this case too. So I'm selecting all those documents, click Create View, and I simply want to glue documents together. So let's call it total. Let's open the view, which includes all those documents as a single virtual file. And now, to make life easier, I will just sort this content, let's say by source text length. So you will be able to see that my changes, the same segments here, as you can see, this is a repeated content. So now if I confirm my change, segment with my change here, with the XXX added, and I will confirm it, all the repetitions gets to be confirmed. So my change was auto-propagated. And this is one of the reasons it's very useful to use views when working both with translation and with a review, if you need to make sure that the same segments will contain the same content. However, sometimes you will get segments that are identical, and despite that, the fact that they are identical, MemoQ will not recognize them as repetitions. How I will show you an example of such file, such segments. So let me first filter that view, and I want to see only segments that are not repetition according to MemoQ. So, okay. Let's go to the beginning of the document. I would like to remind you that this content is now filtered and sorted. So let's just skip some segments, shorter segments first. And let's add a additional filtering criterion to get rid of those numbers. I will add verify source word. Now you can see that there are segments here that are identical in the source, but they are not recognized as repetitions. For example, those two. Those are identical, but not recognized as a repetition. So if I change one of them and confirm it, MemoQ will not alter the second instance of that same segment, because it does not know that, for some reason, I don't know really why, this is not recognized as a repetition. In my experience, it usually happens with Trados Studio documents. Okay, so now I have a segment to insert, but I may not notice that I've already translated, modified the translation as a reviewer. MemoQ shows me there is a 100% match, but if I'm working quickly, I might not notice that there is a different match reviewed by me. So there is a very useful MemoQ setting here. And when you go to Options, Miscellaneous, and Translation tab, there is an option which is called Highlight Target Segment, where the translation is different from the best TM match. If I click that and I go to that verify leaf leakage, and I go to that next segment again, now MemoQ highlights the segment and shows me this text is different from the best translation memory match. So I can be extra vigilant. MemoQ helps me notice that I've already changed that particular source segment, and I've already edited that. Now, I can insert my translation here manually in this case, because MemoQ will not insert anything automatically into confirmed segments. So there is one setting that is actually by default better suited for review than for translation, and that's TM and corpus match overrides target. It's selected by default, and I'm always deselecting it, because if it's selected, you cannot insert translation memory match into already started translation segment. So let's say you start typing your translation, and then you want to insert TM match because it's a partial match. If you insert that TM match into segment you already started typing in, it will overwrite your translation. So as a translator, I'm deselecting TM and corpus match override target. But as a reviewer, I would probably want to enable it, because then I can double click or press Control space or whatever, Control 1, and it will overwrite that whole segment. Now, but do I really need to insert that translation manually here? Not necessarily. I can. Istvan was talking about being lazy, as I'm very lazy translator and reviewer, so I like automation. So instead of manually inserting corrected matches, I can tell MemoQ to change status of all the segments I will be reviewing from translated into not started. So as a reviewer in a local project or online project, you can always have an option to change segment statuses. You can set them as not started, edited, and pre-translated. If you want to use MemoQ automation to insert matches for you, you need to set the status as pre-translated. So, sorry, my mistake. Change segment status again. I want to set all rows in scope as not started. Something's not going right here, so let's try again. Boy,
that's always happens.
Not started. Yes, I will. I will finish quickly. No, it doesn't work for whatever reason. I cannot set the segment status. Let's do one last try. Not started. Active document, let's say, pre-translated. Will it work? No, it won't. Well,
we're a bit out
at
of
least
time.
for pre-translated, MemoQ inserts my fuzzy match too. As you can see, I've confirmed the segment, this one, edited by me as a reviewer. MemoQ jumped to the next segment and confirmed, which had a not pre-translated status, and it inserted the edited segment automatically there. Of course, there is a lot more to those settings. I'm working here with a very basic scenario without actual translation memory, which contains those translations. If you do have a translation memory, it gets a bit more complex. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time to dwell on that. But just to point you to the right direction, if you want to have a priority of your reviewed documents, instead of getting 101% matches from a translator, what you need to do is you need to go to Project Home, Settings, Translation Memory Settings, and you need to create settings for your project where all the segments not confirmed by you will have a 2, 3, 4, 5% penalty. I'm usually setting a 2% penalty, so whatever whatever segments I confirmed as a reviewer will always have higher match rate to compared to the segments translated by a translator. So that way I know that my changes, even if MemoQ does not recognize identical segments as autopropagation, as a repetition, my changes will be always inserted correctly. And unfortunately, we need to stop at that because my time ran out. So thank you very much.